Great Depression in America was a terrible time where unemployment was at its peak and stock markets were crashing, which eventually became known as Black Tuesday and Black Thursday. This unfortunately fell under Herbert Clark Hoover's presidency. But what if I told you that Herbert Clark Hoover was not a bad guy, and I'd even argue not a bad president? The election of 1928 was a landslide, with Al Smith, Herbert Hoover's opponent, only winning over 8 states, while Herbert Hoover won all the rest. And as you can see on those pie charts, source was Wikipedia, there was a huge landslide in the electoral votes as well, with Herbert Hoover gaining 444 electoral votes, which is 84% of all of the electoral office. Before this, Herbert Hoover was known as an American hunger hero, for in World War I, he supplied many people with food when they couldn't really have access to it, And in World War II, he tried to help many people escape what was being under German rule, and he was also trying to send them food. He was even rebutting against people criticizing him for feeding individuals who believed in other ideologies like communism. Herbert Hoover saying 20 million people are starving. Whatever their politics, they shall be fed. To no surprise, Herbert Hoover immediately won over America with his great reputation and became the 31st President of the United States. However, unfortunately, the year he was inaugurated, 1929, America went into a huge financial crisis, commonly known as the Great Depression today. Which actually just made the Great Depression worse because the tariffs on everything just rose and rose. But I do still have to point out some bad things Herbert Hoover did. For example, he tried to veto the Bonus Loan Act, which would basically give war veterans more money, but his veto was overridden by Congress. Public anger for Herbert Hoover rose so much that people started calling villages full of unemployed people Hoovervilles to spite Herbert Hoover because they thought he wasn't doing anything. But Herbert Hoover really was trying to do stuff. He even made the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which was supposed to lend money to banks and other industries that distributed money to attempt to stabilize the economy. However, people still hated Herbert Hoover so much. On July 28th, 1932, a group of army men organized an attack on the White House to try and convince Herbert Hoover to give more support to able-bodied veterans, as they haven't been getting enough support from Herbert Hoover's administration, even though Herbert Hoover had actually been trying to support veterans this whole time. Now, did Herbert Hoover seek re-election? Well, yes, but he was ultimately knocked out of the park by his successor, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, Hoover did have a long connection in politics even after the Great Depression, sometimes even mocking himself for the Great Depression. But unfortunately, he never sought for a presidential campaign again because his love for politics eventually died out at that point, and he was getting too old. This is the last photo of him taken shaking hands with President John F. Kennedy before his death at 90 years old. Now, was Hoover the best president? No, I'll admit that some of the bills he tried to veto that would actually help the American economy through the Great Depression, but I feel like he shouldn't get this much hate for his presidency, even though he actually did try to do things which many people denied. And I feel like that better picture should be painted for this ex-president. Herbert Hoover saved millions of lives, which is something you can't really say about any other American president, and he was a true hero in my eyes. What do you guys think about Herbert Hoover? Please leave it in the comments below. I know I already get a lot of comments trashing me for my opinion, but I just really think Herbert Hoover was a great guy, and I'd even say to an extent he was a pretty good president, even though some unfortunate events overshadowed him.